So when we are doing these attacks, or when we want to launch these attacks, what is the process that we would follow? So there are 6 steps that we would do as an ethical hacker. If you are just a hacker, you probably wouldn't do the 6th step, which is a reporting step. So the first step that would be done is the reconnaissance phase, which is the information gathering phase, which is very important from an ethical hacker's perspective or a hacker's perspective. Because if I want to attack someone or something as a digital device, I need to know what I'm attacking. I need to know the IP address of the device, the MAC address of those devices. I need to know the operating system, the build or the version of that operating system's applications on top, the versions of those applications, so I know what I'm attacking. For example, if I want to attack a server, I assume it's a Windows-based server and I use a particular tool to attack it, but it actually turns out to be a Linux-based server, my attacks are going to be unsuccessful. So I need to focus my attack based on what is there at the other end. So in my information gathering phase, I want to identify all of that information. Once I have that information done, I'm going to scan those servers using tools like Nmap that we just talked about, and we're going to try to see the open ports, open services, and protocols that are running on that server that can give me possible entry points within the network or within the device or within the operating system. At the same time, along with the scanning with Nmap, I would run a vulnerability scanner, the Nessus vulnerability scanner we talked about, or Akinetics for applications, and then I would try to identify vulnerabilities in those applications, operating systems, or networks. Once I have identified those vulnerabilities in the scanning phase, I would then move on to the gaining phase, where I would then craft my exploits or choose existing exploits and start attacking the victim. At this point in time, if my attack is successful, I will probably have gained access by either cracking passwords or escalating privileges or exploiting a vulnerability that I may have found during the scanning phase. Once I have gained my access, I want to maintain my access. Why? Because the vulnerability may not be there for long. Maybe somebody updated the operating system and hence the flaw was no longer existing, or somebody changed the password that I may have cracked, thus I no longer have access. So what do I do to maintain my access? I install Trojans or backdoor entries to those systems using which I can secretly, in a covert manner, get access to those devices at my own will, at my own time, as long as those devices are available over the network. So that's where I maintain my access. I have hacked them. Now I want to maintain my access, so I install a software which would give me a backdoor entry to that device no matter what. Once I have done this, I want to clear my track. So whatever activity that I've been doing, for example, installing a Trojan. A Trojan is also a software that would create directories and files once installed on the victim's machine. So I want to hide that. If I have accessed data stores, if I have modified data, I want to hide that activity, because if the victim comes to know that something has happened, they would start increasing their security parameters. They might start scanning their devices. They may take them offline. Thus, my hack would no longer be efficient. The reason I'm clearing my tracks is that the victim doesn't find out that they've been hacked or they've been compromised, or even if they do find out that they've been compromised, they cannot trace the compromise back to me. So I would be deleting references of any of the IP addresses or MAC addresses that I may have used to attack that particular device. And this is where I would be able to identify where those logs were created, where those traces are. Once I take off those traces, the victim would not be any wiser of whether they have been compromised or who compromised their system. And if I am successful at all of these stages, or to whatever extent the success that I've achieved in any of these stages, I would then create a report based on that, and I would report to the management about the activities that we have been able to do and whatever we have been able to achieve out of those activities. For example, we identified 10 different flaws. There were 20 different attacks that we wanted to do. What attack did we do? What was the outcome of that attack? What was the intended or the expected output of that attack? I'll create a report which would give a detailed analysis of all the steps that were taken, along with screenshots and evidences of what activity was conducted, what was the output, what was the expected output, and I would submit that report to the management, giving them an idea of what vulnerabilities and flaws exist in their environment or their devices that need to be mitigated so that the security can be enhanced. So these are the 6 steps that the ethical hacking process would take. Just going to this, the Reconnaissance is where you're going to use hacking tools like Nmap, HPing to obtain information about targets. There are hundreds of tools out there depending on what information you want. Then in scanning, again, Nmap, expose these kind of tools to be utilized to identify open ports, protocols, and services. In gaining access, you're going to exploit the vulnerability by using the Metasploit tool that we talked about in the previous slides. In the maintaining access, you're going to install backdoors. You can use Metasploit at the same time. You can craft your own scripts to create a Trojan and install it on the victim's machine. Once you have achieved that, clearing tracks is where you're going to clear all evidences of your activity so that you do not get caught or the victim doesn't even realize that they have been hacked. And once you're done all of this, you're going to create reports that are going to be submitted to the management to help them understand the current security evaluation of their organization.